All right. Well, I am always looking for interesting, different angles to bring to leverage and great content. And I think content is king right now. And before I knew my guest today of leverage, Reuven Gorsht, I subscribed to your newsletter. He is the CEO of Deeded. So if you've never heard of Deeded, you're going to find out all about it today. But what I really was always impressed with, and I always believe in myself, I hope I do a good job as well, is like when people put out newsletters, when people send you an email, when people put out content, you know, what kind of value is there, right? Are you cutting and pasting? Are you giving someone value in it? Are you giving someone your opinion? Is it great in-depth insight? I actually, by the way, was playing around on the site because I had always just read your newsletter, would click on an article that was interesting to me and then moved on and never kind of dug into the website. So I did the other day, and I started actually reading about status certificates because I was like, okay, I know about status certificates. What can Reuven tell me about status certificates? And I thought it was great. Anyway, so I would like to welcome Reuven Gorsht to Leverage. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. It's super excited to be here.
Yeah, I am. I'm always like impressed with people's accomplishments. So let's start with the fact that you are a Harvard Business graduate. And you created, founded, and sold to RBC back in 2019, if I'm correct. MoveSnap. So you created it in 2016. It was on my radar back then. It was revolutionary of its time. And so congratulations on that. And I would love to kind of start there before we even get into Deeded. You're clearly an entrepreneur. You see the need for these products. So tell me like what got you to that point where you're like, MoveSnap makes a lot of sense. Like I need to create this because you're not an agent, right? Most people create things that they need, right? And they're like, wouldn't that be a great idea? So tell us, catch us
Yeah,
up.
Rachel. So in my case, it wasn't from an agent's perspective. It was more of me going through the process of you buy a house, you get excited, you got to move, and then you kind of realize that no matter how many times you've moved, and I've moved a few times, every single time is a little bit different, and someone's going to throw a wrench into that process.
For sure.
For me, that process happened actually after the move when I was on a conference call at work. I still remember my wife calls me on the other line. I kind of ignored the call the first time, and then the second call I said, "Hey, hang on a sec.
It was like my world.
Yeah, let me see what's going on. It sounds a little bit urgent." And she's just flabbergasted. She was pulled over by a cop, and the
Oh,
address on her driver's license didn't match the new address. We didn't know at the time that you had 7 days from like you got your
isn't that
life in
crazy?
your life in boxes. Yeah, you got your life in boxes. I started researching. It's like it takes 7 days, or you have 7 days after your move to update your driver's license. So on the eighth day, when you get pulled over, I think it was $110 ticket at the time. Doesn't no
Oh,
points,
that's
no.
ridiculous.
Yeah, no biggie, but just the inconvenience and luckily, it just led to more discovery, and I started talking to friends and family and new agents in the neighborhood, and so it's like, "Do people actually know what they're doing?" Like oh yeah, I send my clients a checklist. That's what agents would say. Like you get this like 2-page PDF, and but the issue with checklists, Rachel, was that, they're so generic. It's like, hey, don't forget to,
And by the way,
pack
you'll
food for
forget
your
everything.
dog, right? Yeah, something so generic. And it's like, I don't even have a dog. What if I have a cat? What do I do? And all that stuff. So that's where, the initial concept was kind of born with like, what if we, in this age of, digital, became really smart about understanding that, hey, I'm moving from like downtown Toronto to Mississauga. I don't know if people still do that or if it's vice versa, but here's my new hydro provider. Here's what I need to go to connect my gas. Here's the internet providers in my area. And by the way, don't forget to update that driver's license because you know what's going to happen there. So we, kind of went out and really built everything based on real situations and real feedback. The real magic spark came from talking to agents, and one gap that many agents identified is like, hey, you know what, I always get a hard time from clients when I sign an agreement. So, an offer gets accepted, whether you're buying or selling, and then naturally I have to go off to my next transaction, right? And then, there's that 30, 60, 90 days sometimes of, what we call misery for clients. We think they're happy for 24 hours. And then they realize that they've got 25 years of their lives that they need to stick in boxes or storage or something, right? And sell stuff. And, how it works. You realize that, we've been in our house, I think, for 7 years, and we got more stuff than we know what to do with. Like if we
My
ever
line
move.
is always, I've never had a client tell me, I don't have that much stuff. Like if I had a dollar for every time a client, you know, we check in, we drop, we deliver all of the moving supplies and all this stuff, and we're very hands-on with our clients. But, even then, listen, people don't want you to touch their things all the time. I'm going to do it. Don't worry, And I always check in. They're like, oh my God, we have so much. Where did we get it? They don't even realize how much stuff they have, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
I always
Yeah,
say, like, your life is so busy to begin with.
it is. It
Like,
is.
forget anything else. Forget a big project, forget a renovation, forget moving. Your life is so busy. And then you want to add in moving. People don't, they just think, oh, I'm going to hire, like, it's fine. We're just going to pack up our suitcases and we'll pack up our dishes and we'll hire a mover. And it's like, and then you have to add on remembering your driver's license. So that's a great one.
All that stuff, right? So from an agent's perspective, there wasn't anything to kind of still keep connected with your clients, help them out through this, kind of miserable time, right? And again, like all agents were doing, some agents were sending checklists, which is again, like it's good, but it's not great.
It
It
checks
doesn't
a
tell you
box
how
for
to
us.
do it,
Yeah, it checks a box for
all
them
that
on their
stuff,
side.
and most importantly, there was no one to call for help, right? So some stuff you just can't find online, and you need someone, especially when people are busy, they're busier than ever. People are holding two jobs, kids, travel, work, all that stuff, right? So we've started even adding in like a team of concierges that would like basically be super resourceful. We've had, I remember a young lady in Ottawa, and she was just having her first child. Her husband got relocated for work in Toronto. So he was already in Toronto. She's about to have a baby any day now. And she's like, I need to sort some things out. I don't even know where to go in Toronto. So we found a whole bunch of resources, childcare, nanny agencies, all that good stuff. And they were forever grateful. So back to the agent angle, it's about adding that value, because we all know that the last impression of a transaction is just ever so important, right? People for whatever reason, Rachel, they don't remember the fact, that you're in your car at 2 a.m. negotiating an offer and you got them an extra 5K, right? But they're gonna somehow
In
remember
the
that,
rain.
yeah, that closing gift or something silly. Like, when I ask people like, what do you remember about your agents? Like, yeah, they brought in a pizza on move day. And it's like everything else kind of, gets overshadowed, and these little things stick. And it turns out it's actually rooted in behavioral psychology, like that people remember like the peaks and ends of the experience. So with MoveSnap, it was about how do we make that end so great that we finish the transaction on a really good note. So when you're calling that client and saying, how did everything go? Do you know anybody else that, is interested in buying and selling? They're like, of course, we love you. You've provided the best service ever, right? So that was the whole, purpose and value.
So I find it so interesting because I think that it is a piece of our business that is missing. And it actually comes on the heels of the day that we are in this episode. They just announced that all iPro Realty brokerages are closing down.
Yeah, I just saw that.
24 agents they're not out of jobs. They're looking for a brokerage or not. Because the reality is, if those 2,400 agents were bringing in business, iPro wouldn't be going out of business. So I believe that this part of the business, it's what is missing and where those agents unfortunately miss out on that referral basis. So there's either you take it in-house, like we do that in-house, larger teams do that in-house with our, customer care director, whatever it is. But if you are an independent agent and you don't have the time, because most don't. I remember when I was independent, there's no way I was delivering that. And MoveSnap would allow you to say, hey, here's a fee. And we have a common agent we know that used to do this with his clients before he sold RBC. I'm not sure if he still does it, where it's like, if you buy with me, I will give you MoveSnap to help you. And he passes that on. So it's but I think it's brilliant because our role, and I always say this, like, first of all, obviously our role is to be incredible negotiators, to fight for our clients on either side of the table. But the other part is also to be there from beginning to end and afterwards, right? So, where's that phone call, on day 5 going, hey, did you change your license? I just want to make sure because you've got 48 hours before you get pulled over.
Yeah.
And because, you know what? Those are the things and I've seen it where people are like, you didn't tell me? And you're like, well, like you said, you're like, I was in my car at 2:00 in the morning and you're mad at me because I forgot to tell you about your driver's license. But you know what? It's all part and parcel. You cannot cut that part of it out. It's just as important. So I think it's brilliant. And it's still going. I full visit. We talked about it just because I do all this in-house. MoveSnap is still operating under RBC.
It's not. I think RBC has wound it down about a year ago.
What a shame. What a shame. But banks are very bottom line, right? So I know a lot of those, unfortunately, right? Their numbers are down, so they probably don't see it. But I think it was a brilliant.
But the aspect of, I think what we're, the aspect of the conversation about providing that not only service, I would say, there's a critical difference between service and experience, because at the end of the day, a lot of great agents are now thinking about the experience, and they would identify as being in the experience business as opposed to a service is something that, it's status quo. You deliver on the milestones. Thank you. See you later. As opposed to just covering the entire basis. And to your point, Rachel, that makes a big difference on growth. And it's always long tail growth. I know we all love, leads. We all love to have more clients, but one thing we've seen work in the most simplistic way, but it works like a charm, is if you're delivering that experience. What do people love about experiences? They talk about them. People talk about Costco. People talk about, going to like Lululemon and Disney and some of those brands. And that's how they continue to grow exponentially. And when you do that, you're not a slave to always like chasing the next lead or chasing, the next bit of advertising, right? So
no, I was actually just on a call yesterday with an agent that I did a deal with for the first time. We'd never known each other before, and both of us have been in business a long time. Similar approach to the whole business, and I think that's where it goes is like when we hear like sales are down or people, there's nothing happening or volume is up. I have to tell you, if you call 5 like senior agents right now, we're all incredibly busy because I think the old school way was like you drop off that closing gift and then you wait for the phone call like 5 years later, 10 years later, whatever, right? Whereas I actually like full visibility. I don't do closing gifts. You know why? Because my clients get gifts from me every single year, every other month, on their birthdays, on their for the next 10 years, even if they bought their forever house. So it 100%. And again, I don't advertise. So I think that's really the way it's going, and you can't be that iPro part-time agent anymore. But that's a great segue. So we'll stop there and say, I think that when we spoke, my biggest question was, okay, let's talk about experience. Let's talk about where did Deeded come from? And you were like, well, we just deliver on experience. Like, we're just better. And I was like, let's talk about that because you clearly understood how to deliver the experience of closing with MoveSnap. So let's get into Deeded,
Yeah,
your new
absolutely.
brainchild, your new baby.
So Deeded is not so new anymore. We're about 5 years, and 5 years have flown by
Really? Okay.
so quickly, but very similar development concept. So again, this is me closing on my house now, right? And had a what I thought was a great lawyer at the time, but on closing day I got a surprise call, literally a couple hours from when we're supposed to get our keys, and they'd missed the document. I knew where the document was. I couldn't get to it in time, and we ended up basically being homeless for the weekend, which is an awful experience.
Awful
Just
experience.
it wasn't. The Holiday Inn Express is not that bad. They've got water slides if you've got kids and all that stuff. But when with all
That's
your
okay.
stuff in limbo, and if you've ever been in a transaction that gets delayed, it's not fun. Everybody's out for your wallet. The movers want money. The bank wants
Oh,
money.
yeah.
So it's thousands of dollars. Um, and again, just started kind of scratching my head and spent, a few weeks. I knew a lot of real estate lawyers. I knew a lot of agents. Is this the way things work? And surprisingly, it was, right? Like the legal side. So every transaction somehow going to, whether you're buying or selling, you're going to end up working with a lawyer in a lawyer's office at some point. And there's some really, really phenomenal lawyers. I want to be very honest, but for the majority, they're not a business, right? They're a legal practice. They might have a lawyer and a clerk or a couple clerks. So that means that when we talk about experiences are not about delivering a one-time experience. Experiences are about consistency, right? Everybody that goes to Starbucks has the same experience. Everybody that goes to a Disney park has hopefully the same experience, right? So we started to think about, so how do we deliver that consistently and then elevate that legal closing experience to a level that people will rave about it? And that was a challenge. And it still is a challenge, right? Because
Especially the legal part of it, right? Like, it's not the sexy part of the process for sure.
it's not, Rachel. And I always say, like, how many people go and, have a root canal, and they post a Google review saying, oh my God, that root canal was so incredible. I can't believe it, right? But to our surprise, we've got a so the way Deeded works is we're essentially an alternative to using a lawyer. You still get an amazing lawyer, but you also get a law clerk and a legal assistant. So you get a whole team around you that's now available to answer your questions by phone, by email, by text, um, even after hours. But you also have a technology aspect where you are able to check in essentially on your transaction and see exactly where you're at. Similar to, I think most of us are familiar with ordering from Amazon, or getting an Uber Eats, and you can see exactly where your transaction's at any given time. So it just alleviates a lot of that anxiety and stress that most clients have.
So you get the concierge, you get a lawyer, you get a concierge. Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, again, coming back to, there's great lawyers, but they're not standardized businesses, right? Which means you're going to get.
Sorry, I was interrupted. The greatest line I ever got from one of the lawyers, and I deal with a couple that I really adore they'll hold hands, they're lovely. But the greatest line I ever heard was, lawyers are not in the business of managing your expectations. So it's like, I've had that where like clients will be like, I have this, or when's this happening? I'm like, guys, just send them a standardized outline. Like, this is the date, these are the things, but like, that's not their they're lawyers, right? So sorry to interrupt, but I think that that's a really good understanding the mentality of that industry. And then what I love is that you've taken it and gone, okay, that's fine. That can still be the way, but like, how do we now create an experience which is pleasant and has, visibility to it? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And bring back, or bring a layer of experience, right? So and again, lawyers are probably no different than I always say, when you go to get your car serviced at the dealership, right? And what the dealerships have figured out is this role of, I know in my dealership, they call it a service advisor. And this is like the pleasant person and that wear a nice tie, and you tell them, I heard a noise that sounds like this. And then they translate that to the mechanics. And, so there's a good reason why that layer is there, because it just, it helps communicate with the mechanics. And then of course the mechanics will still do the job. They're the ones that are responsible for, making sure that your car's fixed. So again, I'm not equating lawyers to mechanics, but at the end of the day, that whole experience layer that's been put in, whether if it's hospitality or even your Starbucks, right? You got your baristas working on the machine while you've got someone, taking your order, understanding exactly what you want, right? And translating that for the barista, right? So what we've done at Dita is really no different. Same concept, of just putting that experience and service layer on it, but also looking at all the friction points that exist and trying to address them one by one. One such friction point is virtual. Now, virtual, when we first came to market in just right after COVID, virtual was brand new, and in fact, COVID is what spurred it. And there's a misnomer there about virtual closings as they're impersonal. I still want to go to the office and I want to sign documents, right? Exactly. But we've had that, Rachel, with even, I remember when in real estate, when you were allowed to sign your offers electronically, when DocuSign came out, for years agents were still faxing or even driving offers around for no good reason.
I don't even know why people, I mean, once in a while I will still have to sign stuff in person with, more elderly people who don't, are not electronically literate, or they want to see it in person. But I mean, I always say to people, I'm like, you guys don't know what like our days look like when we were driving. And by the way, like that's why offer presentation nights were in person, because you couldn't go back and forth and, oh, let me just get you to DocuSign the change. We all stood outside in our cars and then went in and presented our offer and then went back and forth. I mean, the whole thing changed. But
Yeah, yeah.
virtual, again, going back to this idea of like, no one has any time. You want me to come in to the office? I mean, I think we bought this house 16 years ago and we signed in person.
Yeah, yeah. But so that's, convenience is one thing about, virtual closing with a lawyer. The other thing really ties into experience, and it's something that that is not as obvious. Generally, if you've been to a real estate lawyer's office, they have very little time for you. So you come in, you've got 15 minutes, max 30. You're going to come in, sign here, sign here, sign here. Most people walk out not feeling great or reassured. And that's just because you're on somebody else's schedule, right? You've got kids to pick up from daycare. You've got to get back, in traffic. What we find is, again, everybody loves their home. You're in your home. I'm in my home. This is our comfortable space. We can be ourselves. We can take our time. We can ask questions. We can put our kids to sleep. We can walk our dog. And it's a completely different feeling. And that's a lot of the feedback that we've been getting, is that, not only is it virtual convenience, but I'm actually feel like a person. I don't feel rushed. I feel like a VIP. I get to ask any questions. And we make sure that, all our lawyers and all our staff understand that they are an experience business. And, there's a saying out there by an old friend of mine, and he used to say back in the day, was something that really resonated with me, is that the only stupid question is the one that you didn't ask. Right. And especially when it comes to these big purchases, like, we don't want regrets. We want, our clients to be happy. We want them to enjoy their home and not have to worry about all this other stuff.
It's so true. And so many people are also, by the way, like intimidated by lawyers. They don't want to insult. We're still Canadian. We're so polite. I get it all the time. And I also know that I think a lot of people think that real estate lawyers like just rake it in. But, unless you're getting into litigation, it's a pretty standardized business. It's done on volume. It's very cut and paste, which is probably why a lot of them are like, all right, like just pass it on to the clerk. Hi, how are you? If you have any questions, let me know and we'll be in touch. And then it's kind of like, if you have a 90-day closing, you may actually not even hear from them for 60 days, like, which can be very unnerving from the average person. So, do you offer like tiered pricing for services? Do you offer like, does this just come as a like, hey, we've got this concierge kind of approach to it and it's the same price as any other standard lawyer? How do you guys do that model?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rachel. So at the moment, we're keeping things very standard and transparent because that's the other thing when it comes to pricing. I always say, imagine walking into Starbucks and getting a coffee, and then they'll say that'll be $12 because they didn't tell you the coffee is $2, and then there's all these extra charges. There are, but they let you know. And legal services, that's how generally in real estate and others, they're priced. There's something called disbursement. So you'll have your legal fee, which is usually about $1,000, $1,200, and then you've got a whole bunch of expenses that your lawyer incurs, and some of them are government expenses. So living in Ontario, you've every registration, every title search, which is a lot of the activities that happen in the background that are required by law. Unfortunately, they cost money, and that cost is passed to the consumer. We all know things like land transfer taxes are usually a big, big bill.
The ugly land transfer tax. That's right.
Yeah. And then there's title insurance. So the approach that we've taken is, really bundle it all in, be extremely transparent, for the reason that people just want to understand the cost and they want to budget accordingly. Nobody likes surprises. And then just deliver a great service, no, without any tiers. Like you shouldn't be, a VIP. And I know, there's folks that have, that work in large corporations and they'll have, a big firm lawyer and you get the red carpet and you get the nice, Nespresso when you come in. We try to serve that to everybody.
Yeah, except that you also, when you walk in, like, it's actually funny. I will actually refer my lawyers to my clients to say, these are great, hardworking, like been in the business a long time. I totally trust them. And they're not Bay Street lawyers, meaning they're not going to be $1 million because you're already paying your land transfer tax. You've already just spent a lot of money on your house. You now have to deal with moving costs and your mortgage and blah, 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 blah. And so to find like people actually, they want good service, but they don't want to have to pay for someone's rent. So it's an interesting perspective. Like when people are like, well, how much does it cost? I'm like, definitely not quoting. Thank you so much. Pass you along. Please advise, what are your costs? Here's the address. So it's good to know that, you guys are also in line. So if someone did want to try you, that it wouldn't be like, oh, we offer this. But by the way, I'm all about paying more for value, not rent, value and experience for sure. But it sounds like you're doing that for the same price.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it depends on the market you're in. So, for example, Toronto's very competitive. There's an abundance of lawyers and legal services. If you're out in Peterborough, it's a little bit different, right? So then, obviously that value varies in terms of savings you can have, but it does amount not only to savings, but just again eliminating the stress that comes along with all of that,
For
and
sure.
there's a value to that
And
as well.
because you are also like, you're not just like, so and so's office or whatever. I get a lot of things in our like brokerage chat about like, oh, does someone have a lawyer that, specializes in assignments, or does a lawyer, I've been able to know a lawyer that specializes in like, recreational properties and that type of thing. So, is this like more of a well-rounded, like we don't just do residential, we do everything? Like what don't you do? What do you do?
Yeah, so we mostly focus on residential and small commercial. We've got a very experienced team that's done literally thousands of transactions, so they've seen it all. However, if there is a specialized property, so for example, one example is waterfront. Some areas and municipalities, like, you may have records hidden for 100 years, and they're in the local office and all that
The
sort of
wild,
stuff.
wild west. Yeah.
Yeah, we would always recommend, if you're buying that, dream Muskoka cottage to use somebody local because they've got the knowledge and know-how in the network. But for everything else, we've had a lot of success handling all sorts of properties from condos to islands.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's great advice. I always say, like, buying, I sold one cottage property for a client who asked me, and I bought and sold three of them. I felt very comfortable with it, had done it, and it was straightforward. But some of the agents that were coming from like Toronto that had absolutely very little experience of residential at all, and then coming into the waterfront, it actually scared me even to just sell it to them. So I think, knowing what you do well, and that's it. But listen, I'd love to sell in cottage country and just stay there. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, if you don't know what potable water is and well testing and wet testing and all that stuff, just
Oh my God,
steer
no.
clear.
Oh my God, and shoreline allowance and the lake, no,
Absolutely.
forget it.
Yeah.
So we will put all the information in the show notes. So if people are interested and they want to get in touch with Deeded, and also link to your newsletter. I have to tell you, if you are a real estate fanatic, you have any interest, you're thinking about selling, buying, whatever. I actually, to be quite honest, I don't even know how I got on your mailing list, but it's not even like, what I love about it is that it's not salesy. It's not like, this is what we do. It's like, here's just all this incredible information about what's going on in the industry. And that's what, like, when we got on the call just to like pre this episode, I felt like you and I could talk like for hours and hours just about the industry. So let's finish it off with that. So I have been thinking a lot in the last 48 hours, and it's so interesting to see iPro announced today. We already saw that there was a decrease for the first time in the amount of agents coming out. We're seeing more and more of the business fall into the hands. Like, it was already 95% of us is done by 5% of us, but it's like I'm finding it more and more. We've never been busier. We're back to COVID volume on my team. It's crazy. And, knowing that, and I hate always doing predictions because, like, I feel like the smartest people in the world got COVID wrong, right? So the thought that now, this is kind of like a different time we're going into, the buyers have changed, and there's a lot of talk about this idea that for the last 40 years, every 10 years, there was this model that your house would double in value, right? It was like, just hold on to it. I remember when I bought my very first house, and the most lovely, shout out to Joy Verde, I went to her, great mentor, and she said, sweet spot was you hold on to it for 5 to 7 years, you got great equity, and then you move up. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that trend is going to continue in Toronto. I think it just got crazy. I think we're in for a few years of instability between Trump and the Liberal government. Trump's out after this one, but like, I just think we have a lot of turmoil in the world. And so are we going to see less people moving? I mean, I have these conversations with clients all the time, right? Why do you want to move? Are you sure you want to move? Do you know how expensive it is to move? Commissions, land transfer, moving, all the things we just talked about, fine, like all of that stuff. What do you think about that prediction? That we're just like these lower level numbers of like 5,000 a month, 6,000 a month, right? Instead of these 9, 10,000 a month. I think this is the new normal. Fluctuating. I'm not like, do you know what I mean? But I think people are like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? It's too risky. I think maybe I'll just stay put.
Yeah, I think that's a really great topic, Rachel. A couple thoughts. One is, I mean, since we're in the transaction business, there's always going to be transactions because life happens, right?
Yes.
People get
You have
married,
a baby,
divorced,
they get married.
exactly,
Yes.
upsize, downsize, and our needs change, right? So our needs for shelter change, right? So there's always going to be that constant. One thing that needs adjusting, which is happening now, this iPro is a good example, is that the market was built for a COVID size, 21, 22 in record transactions. And if you look at the Korea charts or, it's a huge spike, which arguably we'll never see again, right? And I think we've got to kind of come to
I
peace
agree.
with perfect storm with the pandemic. We're all bored. So what are we doing? We're looking for houses. We don't know if we're going to live till the end of the year.
Our
Let's buy
government
that
overspending.
cottage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Too
let's
much
put a
money in our
deposit
pocket.
down. Yeah, let's put a deposit down on 6 condos. The party was great, but the music has stopped and there's not enough chairs to sit on for the number of not only agents, but there's agents, there's mortgage brokers, there's appraisers, every one of us inspectors, every one of us sees the writing on the wall that the market is only, so big for everyone. So what's happening now is exactly what you said. I was on a call earlier with a good friend of mine who's one of the top real estate coaches, and she's saying, look, the same thing you're saying. My top agents are super busy. So despite being a smaller pie, the proportions have changed to more of the haves and have-nots. So there's the haves that are doing really well, and in my opinion, they're doing well because you are consistent and nothing. Yes, the market changes. Yes, the buyers are finicky, but before the sellers were finicky, right? Like a couple of years ago, we couldn't find sellers, and we can't find buyers, and it's there's always going to be that. If you want the ideal path, you've chosen the wrong career. Sorry,
So
right?
true.
Right? You
No, it's
want to
not for
sleep
the
well
faint of
at
heart.
night?
It's
Yeah,
not for
you
the,
you
and I
you're
and
in
I
the
think
wrong job.
because we've also all been through it, right? I think that that's, people are looking for people who have been through this so that when you say, well, how am I going to sell my house if no one's buying anything? Or, and so having someone guide them through that with an expert hand versus someone going, well, we could try this or we could try that, is not going to deliver the same confidence. And it's for most people, 99, whatever it is, percentage, it's the biggest purchase of their entire lives, right? So,
So you're going to see that we're going to continue to see that disparity of haves and have-nots, and I think at the end of the day, the consumer wins, and that's what I would love to see is that every transaction you're part of, you get the most professional, best bang for your best value for your dollar agent, mortgage broker, lawyer, appraiser, and then everybody's committed to delivering a really great experience, because when we all work together and we all collaborate, that's the magic. That's when our industry thrives. And when we don't, we regress, right?
and I think it's really about I think it's and I believe like what you're doing with the legal part of it is an example of where I think we all have to also rethink what our value proposition is. So, back in the day, value proposition, like how many cards did our parents get about like, call me for a few free evaluation because the data wasn't in their hands. If that's what you're calling me for, you might as well fire me now because I don't deserve your money. So I think understanding, going back to MoveSnap, going back to like all of this is the same kind of trend in saying my role, for example, is not to open a door and throw up a light and tell you what the house next door sold for. And your job as a lawyer, not yours, but like as a legal, closing is not to just say, hey, here's the money you owe me, here's the thing to sign, and good luck. How are we evolving, like you said, to deliver the consumer a better experience, more value, and you know what? And work hard for, like, we should be delivering on what they hire us for. So I think it's amazing. I know our team is definitely going to look to use you guys in the future, and I'm going to continue to read your newsletter. I love it, and I thank you for your time today. This was a really great discussion, and I feel like there's more to come. I mean, I don't know. Maybe next time the next headline will call you and you'll come and tell us what you think.
Absolutely, would love to. Thanks so much for having me, Rachel. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. We appreciate it. That was great.